The paper trembled in the officer's hands as he read it twice, then a third time, certain he had misunderstood. Volunteers were supposed to be invisible supporting shadows behind real soldiers. Yet there it was, printed in stark black ink, impossible to ignore. Her name, her actions, her choice. No one in the camp had expected that. She had arrived months earlier with a canvas bag slung over one shoulder and eyes that carried more questions than fear. No rank on her sleeve, no weapon in her hands. Just a quiet willingness to help where others hesitated. She told herself she was there to make a difference in small ways: bandages, water, listening when the nights grew heavy. She never imagined history would notice. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me in the comments where you're rewatching from. I love knowing who's listening. The war had a sound of its own. Wind slipping through broken shutters, distant thunder that wasn't weather, the low murmur of people waiting for bad news. She learned those sounds quickly, how they settled into the bones. Each morning, she volunteered again, despite the fear she pretended not to feel. Each night she wondered if kindness was enough in a place that devoured it so easily. The others barely noticed her at first. Volunteers came and went. Some couldn't handle the pressure. Some left quietly in the dark. She stayed. She cleaned wounds long after her hands shook. She carried stretchers until her shoulders burned. When a frightened boy cried for his mother, she held him and lied gently, because sometimes lies were the only mercy left. She told herself she was doing nothing special. Then came the night the radio went dead. The air felt wrong that evening too, still, like the world was holding its breath. A unit had gone out ahead of schedule, and hours passed without word. Officers whispered. Boots scraped nervously on concrete. She stood near the edge of the room, offering water no one touched. When the signal finally crackled back to life, it carried chaos instead of relief. Ambush, injuries, trapped. Orders flew like sparks, but none landed cleanly. The route back was cut off, evacuation impossible. And somewhere in the confusion, a decision had to be made that would cost lives either way. She listened, heart pounding, as strategies collapsed under the weight of reality. She thought she'd never be asked to choose. She was wrong. When she spoke, the room fell silent, not because her voice was loud, but because it was steady. She knew the terrain. She had walked it delivering supplies. She knew a narrow passage the maps ignored, a place too risky for a full unit, but possible for someone light, fast, unnoticed. She didn't say she would go. She didn't have to. The moral weight of it settled instantly. Sending a volunteer where trained soldiers hesitated felt wrong. Letting men bleed out because of protocol felt worse. The commander met her eyes, searching for doubt. He found none. Only resolve, quiet and unshakable. She went before anyone could change their mind. The night swallowed her as she moved, every sound magnified. Dust coated her tongue. Her hands trembled, not from fear alone, but from the knowledge that she had chosen this. Every step forward was a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. She counted breaths. She listened for danger. She kept going. When she reached them, it wasn't heroics that saved lives. It was patience, careful hands, calm words. Guiding the wounded through darkness, one painful step at a time. When shots rang out nearby, she froze, shielding someone else without thinking. The war noticed her then. It always does. By dawn, they were back. No cheers followed. Just exhausted silence. Men who should have been dead were alive, leaning on each other, eyes wide with disbelief. She slipped away before anyone could thank her, convinced she had only done what was necessary. Necessary things, she believed, didn't deserve praise. Days later, the dispatches arrived. They were meant for headquarters, dry summaries of movement and loss. But someone had written more. Someone had named her. Not as a volunteer. As the reason a unit survived. The words traveled faster than she ever could, crossing desks and borders, stirring something heavier than admiration. When the news reached camp, whispers followed her footsteps. People looked twice, some with awe, some with guilt. She felt exposed, as if a private truth had been dragged into the light. She wondered if she had crossed a line, if volunteers were allowed to become symbols. That doubt lingered until she saw the families. They came quietly, one by one, hands clasped, eyes wet with gratitude they didn't know how to express. No speeches, no medals, just thanks that trembled with sincerity. In that moment, she understood the cost of being seen and the responsibility that came with it. The climax wasn't a parade or a salute, it was a simple act. She returned to the ward that evening and did what she always did: cleaned wounds, spoke gently, stayed when others left. The difference was that now, when she sat beside the injured, they knew her name, and she knew theirs. The war moved on, as wars do. New reports replaced old ones. But that single dispatch never faded. It reminded people that courage doesn't always wear armor, and leadership doesn't always ask permission. When she finally left, months later, the camp felt quieter without her. Not empty or changed. As if kindness had carved a permanent mark into a place built for destruction. Because courage doesn't announce itself, it reveals itself when no one expects it. And somewhere between the silence of that first night and the ink of a war dispatch, a volunteer learned that even the smallest light can find its way into history. If this story moved you, share your thoughts below and tell us where you're watching from. And if you believe quiet courage deserves to be remembered, subscribe to Whispered Words, where stories like this are told softly but never forgotten.